Hello to the double GDP community. Hello, everyone. We are here with Mark and Jay today to give our update for the sprint ending September 18th. As always, we'll talk through some updates around product, customer, market, and company. Ahmed has submitted a separate video, and we will send a link to that. We'll post a link so that you guys can see that. So we have some of the initial mocks, and then Mark has incorporated some of those into a demo of the app. And so we will actually run through the app on the video, live on tape, as they say. Mark, hand it over to you.
Let me share my screen here. So, hold on. Sorry, guys. Let me reshare. I just want to share the mobile version of it. So it'll look a little bit cleaner. There we go. Okay. So the first step of this is we have an identification card that we can use. This was similar to the mocks that Ahmed built. We actually, you can print these out. The goal here is that the security guard would scan this code and he would be taken to a verification page. Verification page looks like this. I don't have my photo on file right now, but the idea is that they would be able to add that later. Tells them my status. I'm a contractor on the site. My entry expires on October 15th. And so right now it's still valid. You can go look at my entry logs and see when I've actually entered and who reported it. In this case, it's me as another user. I can log an entry as a security guard, and the entry is then logged that way. We go to the entry logs, we should see 4 now. And then from the security guard standpoint, we actually have built a scanning tool. Let me show you that. This is actually all in HTML5, so it runs on the phone, so I don't have to install something separate. And then I can actually go and show you this is my QR code, at which point, see it load, there it is. That's me. So I'm the security guard. That in this case, imagine I'm a security guard scanning with my phone. I want to just go ahead and log the entry, and then the entry is logged, and we now have a list. The goal here is that Poniso will be able to actually get a list of everybody who's logged in, not just that particular contractor. The other goal is that it will be usable by the security guard on a smartphone. So to that end, I picked up the lowest end phone being sold right now on the MTN network in Africa, in Zambia. It runs Android Go, and so I will be doing some more experimentation with that, but it should work for scanning the codes and for entering. And the last piece of this, and this is a little bit ugly, I broke the CSS on it, but you can actually log in with your phone number now. So instead of, in Africa, where you have somebody that might not have an email account readily available, or it might be work related, we can give them a phone number. It can be international. It can be a Zambian phone number. They'll hit their phone number in there. Let me put mine in. This still works. At which point, now it's sending me a code on my phone. It's my development machine. I'm not sure I'm getting a code right now through Twilio, but on the production system, it gives the code through Twilio, and you will then log in with that particular code, and then you're done. You're through the system. Once you're logged in, you can go back and actually work as a security guard and hit the scanner app, which right now is a separate HTML5 app. Let me see if I can just show that real quick. So this is actually an app that's built. So there we go, back to the scan feature. And there's where they can actually start scanning from that point on. So that's sort of where we are. Awesome, Mark.
That's cool. This is amazing progress to go from 0 to something. It's so fun to watch it. So we're gonna.
I'll toss one more thing on there too, Nolan and Mark. It really is great to see Mark. Within like one day of Mark starting to do this, we got a message back from Poniso basically saying that him and the team there have been talking about shifting from stickers to something like a QR code system, and so there's just a really tight and immediate match with the way these guys would like to modernize some of the security access control at the site. What's been nice, A, is that the timing is really right for those guys, and B, like because of that, they're messaging back and forth with us, giving us some the type of information that we need so that Mark doesn't slow down in his development.
Yeah. So we have a meeting scheduled with Poniso tomorrow, and we'll show this to him and start getting reactions. We have some ideas about what's to come in the next sprint, but we will evaluate those relative to what we hear tomorrow, so that we can sort of, what we're thinking comes next is administrative interfaces where you can actually load people in, but there are a few other questions that we have on our mind of other things that might even take priority over that, such as being able to handle multiple security guards at the same time, or being able to, or maybe we're better off just preloading a bunch of users for the first few weeks. So we have a few ideas of what might come up in the next sprint, but excited to get this as a team and start talking about what it takes to deploy it and whether there are any roadblocks there. Mark, anything you want to add on questions or things we want to explore with Poniso?
I think the main thing is just trying to figure out that this flow kind of makes sense for them. Yeah, and what it would look like in terms of getting the contractors ingested in the system, and then getting this actually rolled out to the security guards and getting them trained. So I think we need to think about sort of, what that would look like. So, is it, do we buy the phones and help them kind of, for the first rollout initially, kind of load those phones up and figure out how to use it? Or is it something where they can kind of simply start, as quickly as possible on their end?
Yep. Cool. So next on the agenda is talking about the market. And we had a great dinner with another property developer who is thinking about building another city. And JD, do you want to introduce this topic?
Yeah, that sounds good. There was I guess it was last week. It might have been the week before. I think it was last week. A meeting or dinner organized with potential investors for this new kind of satellite city, small city, also in Africa. And the property developer and entrepreneur who's thinking about developing this business basically pulled together a number of different thought leaders in the space, as well as potential investors across Silicon Valley who might be able to support what he's trying to do there. Really great opportunity for us to do two things. Number one, like get to know some of the supporting community of investor professionals around this space, and get to hear both an early pitch to those folks and some of the types of questions that they're asking about new city developments in Africa. And then the second thing that was really fascinating was the opportunity to basically listen to another property developer talk about his needs, and allow us to compare that to the way that we know Ninkwashi is developing and growing. Interestingly enough, as this potential city development comes online, a number of the same types of early challenges, right? Like you've got to get the earliest residents interested in the community, signing up and paying, right? Like you've got to get some of the relationships with the city and the surrounding government to be well matched up. More important to this particular investor in the stage that they're at versus the stage that Ninkwashi is at, actually, it has to do with recruiting in businesses as really the early anchor tenants. So they're really envisioning creating a place that is just perfect in Africa for technology businesses to come and work and domicile themselves, at least for a portion of their technology staff. As you think about the types of things that those businesses are looking for in a new community that they're going to go live in, really rich needs in terms of business registration, in terms of articulating and allowing the community and the property and the potential businesses to understand regulation, and licensing and all of that kind of stuff. So maybe more so for this potential customer and other new cities that we might work with versus Ninkwashi, we're going to see an early need around business registration and licensing support from a technology perspective. So not something that is early on our roadmap in the build out that we're doing for Ninkwashi, but certainly could be as we look to bring on our next round of customers.
Yeah, I guess one other observation that I've had there is also just sort of how differently, or how much in part of the conversation that we're hearing with this property developer is thinking about the plot of land that they have now and the surrounding space, and thinking about what and how that might grow over time. That also feels like there's somewhat of a different approach to thinking about that land usage and the expansion of it than what we've seen in Ninkwashi. So it's just interesting to think about that. If there's other stuff you want to add here, Jay, we can. Otherwise, I wanted to share some of the observations I've had from reading a little bit about urban planning.
No, yeah, I think let's do that.
Yeah, so I've also been, it's been great for me to read a little, about urban planning and just get more familiar with the processes of urban planning and what goes on there. And some of the things that I've been that have been on my mind. One of the interesting observations is just how rooted everything in urban planning is around land use, and thinking about what is the purpose of this land? Is it public? Is it private? If it is private, what is the way in which it should be used? How is it allocated, if you will? And it got me thinking a lot about sort of how our initial use cases tie back to location. And right now, we don't have a lot of explicit discussion about location. We have played with some ideas of security guards that would be thinking about access control to a specific zone within the property, or that they would have access to different gates or things like that. But we don't yet have an explicit conversation around location or land use within our framework or our data model. And so it's just interesting to think about when and how we want to start tying that stuff together. And then the other thing,
probably relatively, relatively early, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think so too. And I also had a good conversation with another developer who has background working with cities, and his conversation around GIS and different ways of encoding that kind of stuff. So I think there's more to come on this very soon, but it's been a good exercise in thinking about sort of what is an urban plan as essentially at its most foundational. It's talking about a specific group of people using a specific plot of land. Yeah. And then sort of there's lots of permutations and variations on that.
Nolan, one of the things that's actually quite interesting is that the legacy provider of a lot of our providers of a lot of the kind of state-of-the-art or maybe most used GIS software, not dissimilar from the legacy providers of a lot of this kind of most used, most widely adopted GovTech software. Built several decades ago as that particular technology kind of grew up, have a fanatical user base, but a user base that's very used to using some pretty old and legacy software that's hard to change and maybe a little less user friendly than stuff that could be developed now if we were developing from scratch. So it makes me feel really positive that there's a great opportunity to influence the trajectory of technology and as we bring place into this platform.
Yeah. The other thing that was sort of interesting thinking about urban planning is just, the number of different people that are involved and the number of different ways that they're involved, and sort of all of the work that goes into urban planning of trying to get feedback and input from the community. So and then the number of different sort of groups that are, so the city might have a plan, but the city needs to think about that plan relative to state laws and relative to regional allocations and the funding streams and then the different neighborhoods. And it just sort of, there's a process of open hearings and things along those lines. So my mind started spinning on different use cases around like, how does all of that change if you have an application in your hand and you can do a quick poll, or you could do something. There's different ways of getting feedback that would be everything from, a quick poll of people to a vote, and different ways of, there could be different voting algorithms that you assign different property rights or different voting rights to different groups. And then it was also sort of interesting to think about the notion of collecting feedback and how you have, the urban planning process today, how that might look. How would it look different if you had, if you sort of did it in a Wikipedia style environment where everybody could contribute? How does that change or feel different if you have it in a Google Doc style where everything is even more real time than Wikipedia? How does that dynamic change if you handle it in a merge request where you have individual people sort of submitting sort of fully thought out things, or something that needs to quote unquote compile, right? So you do something that it's like, it has to be, you have to, maybe you enforce some consistency where you can submit a plan, but it also has to have a budget associated with it, and somebody can fork and merge it back in. And these are all sort of, this is, more in the visioning stage or sort of brainstorming stage, but it did sort of, it opened my thinking to a lot of different ways that people can contribute and think about different kinds of participation in these group dynamics and creating that plan.
Nolan, I love that you say that, and I think that I think you've better articulated something in terms of like the importance of designing for a broad set of stakeholders than I had in some of the earliest times when I was like talking about this opportunity here. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really glad we added that one kind of requirement line item into our job description for head of engineering, or is basically like, we're looking for someone for folks who are technically oriented, but are also like have experience or are used to designing for multi-stakeholder problems and products, because like it's actually quite rare that folks have done something at that level of interaction complexity, but that is exactly what's going on here.
Cool. Mark, I'd love if you have any thoughts on this.
I mean, I think it really comes down to, I guess a lot of mine will come as we start to roll this thing out and start to see how people use it. I know I know there's a lot of lofty visions on where we could go with this. But I guess it's such a complicated space. Like, there's so many different places we could take this in terms of how people manage their sort of communities. But I guess, yeah, I'm more inclined to kind of see where we spend the next 2 months and then kind of plan out from there. But yeah, it's an exciting space. I mean,
yeah, fair.
Yeah.
Part of all of that has really sort of spurred a desire for me to get more involved in sort of planning processes in San Francisco and learn more about that. And it even made me wonder whether there should be, whether one of a cultural tenet that we should have in the company is the idea that like everybody participates in their local community and learns how that's done and sort of gets the sort of real world sort of challenge of actually getting people working together to balance with the idealism that I think we all bring in terms of how things can work. So
yeah,
just a few thoughts there. And again, all of that's in vision brainstorm land, but it's where my mind is. So I wanted to share some of that. Customer. So quick update. We've booked our trips now to Zambia. Jay and I will be there November 4th through 13th. And then we're going to go a few more days. We'll extend in South Africa and go talk with my uncle a bit. And yeah, I think that'll be a great opportunity to learn from him and also just to have a fun experience in South Africa. And then we're starting to put together our first customer council. So Jay, why don't you say a little bit about what we're thinking there?
Well, I think that it is our intention to make sure that all the approach that we take to the software and the platform and the business is very customer centric from day one. Obviously, we're working hand in hand with the team at Ninkwashi And when we started off this this business, like one of the base things that happened basically in week one was that we agreed with one team there that they would be the founding member of our customer council. And it's basically about time for us to actually beyond kind of at the user level, start setting up some regular meetings of that council. So we've got 2 members of it kind of like enrolled at this point, right? Both Muya and Mark have agreed to play roles with us and help us kind of guide our product and business strategy in a way that is going to match up with the types of needs that new city developers have. We think we would like to invite on also this entrepreneur who's creating a new city that we met with last week. Ideally, what we're going to do is set up and meet with that council, at least for the first time, to talk at the strategy level prior to this visit out to Zambia in November. So expect that we're going to get into scheduling on that, and mid to late October will be the kind of like first all remote meeting of that council.
Great. Also on the company front, I am starting to think about whether it makes sense to try to enlist some sort of advisory board as well. Obviously not like a board of directors, but are there people to whom we would want to turn regularly and get advice that is sort of beyond a customer council and more sort of industry or things like that? And starting to think about what that might, who might be good on that, or what kinds of skills we want to have or experiences we want to have. So some of the thoughts there would be that it would be great to have some sort of connection with Africa and people who know the politics of Africa well, somebody who has experience actually managing a city, hopefully, ideally with international experience, maybe somebody who worked on the Estonia eGov project, somebody who's sold software to cities and understands the buy side, or experiences some of the data or infrastructure or technology issues that cities commonly deal with. A property developer, somebody involved with law, and maybe somebody who thinks about anthropology or maybe ethics in technology or different kinds of things. All of this is preliminary. I wouldn't expect to have any kind of advisory board in place, for several months. But I think that it is valuable to start thinking about it now, and maybe almost write down some personas or profiles of what we're looking for, so that as we have conversations with more people over the next few months, we sort of know when and how to connect the dots and start putting out into the world what it is that we would like. And then as we start meeting people, sort of get them enlisted and excited.
Yeah. What's interesting, Nolan, I think like there's a part of me that actually sees the customer council and advisory board as very much the same in its earliest stages, and potentially evolving to something separate as time goes on. So we might look to that first meeting of a customer council basically as step number one in moving forward what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Maybe there's a simpler approach, certainly in the near term. And then finally, just talking about next steps, I think we covered most of what we're talking about. We're going to meet with Ponisa tomorrow, and then we'll plan out our next sprint. We've moved everything over to Asana, so I think at least my experience with it this last week has been pretty good. So we'll check in with the team and see how people like doing that. But yeah, thinking about how to get going for the next one. Jay, Mark, anything you want to add?
Nothing more on my side.
Great. Well then, oh yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry, I said I'm good.
Oh, okay, great. Well, we'll stop the recording. Bye, everyone.
See you guys.